I think that's one of the philosophical themes behind the series is like, how far are you willing to go, get to the truth? And she causes an enormous amount of harm getting to it. And I guess if I had to make the call, then I would probably come down on the side of, yeah, she causes all this harm, but isn't it better to know the truth than to continue following the lie, right? I mean, because following the lie is going to have consequences eventually too, right?
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between, or beyond. Today I'm here with Matt Larkin. Along with his wife and daughter, Matt lives as a digital nomad, traveling the world while researching for his novels. He reads approximately a bazillion books a year, loves video games, and relaxes by binge-watching Netflix with his wife. As a child, Matt read The Lord of the Rings with his parents. This sparked a lifelong obsession with fantasy and started him on a path of discovering the roots of fantasy through mythology. He now writes science fiction as well as retellings of mythology as dark, gritty fantasy. His passions of myth, philosophy, and history inform his series. He strives to combine gut-wrenching action with thought-provoking ideas and culturally resonant stories. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
So as you mentioned, you live as a digital nomad at times anyway. How did that get started?
Okay, so I think we first got the idea because I met another digital nomad at a writers' conference in London. We had flown there, my wife and I, and we met him and his girlfriend or wife, I think girlfriend. And this was many years ago, and we were fascinated with his idea, and we had already kind of begun exploring the idea of minimalism as a life philosophy, trying to cut down on our stuff and our distractions and really focus on living life with intentionality. And related to that, I had always wanted to travel more and research more. I do a lot of retellings of mythology. So I feel like it's very important to see the places and interact with the cultures where these stories originated. So in a perfect world, I travel to all the places that I can, that I want to write about, to learn as much as I possibly can. But of course, when you want to travel, it tends to be very expensive. When you want to travel as a digital nomad, it tends not to be very expensive because you have no bills at home. So the cost of wherever you're staying replaces your lifestyle cost. So there were places that we traveled for my research, like say Sweden, that were still very expensive and we couldn't stay very long. But there were other places that we traveled and we were able to stay for months, and live more cheaply than we would have back when we used to live in the US.
Right. So what's the longest you've stayed anywhere then, other than, I mean, where you were born or your home?
Well, my wife is originally from India, so we've spent a lot of time there. Uh, and of course, I grew up in the US, so we spent a lot of time there. But the longest anywhere else would be Scotland, where I am now.
I'm just curious, do you have a home base in say Scotland or something, and then you go abroad, or do you have to get a new place each time you come back?
Previously, we had no home base. Since we moved to Scotland early this year, we've just been here, and we actually haven't done a lot of traveling outside Scotland here. So we just, come back to our home in Aberdeen. We do hope to resume more traveling soon, but when you get settled and you start integrating into a place, life tends to fill up. It gets busy. My daughter's in school. Again, we used to homeschool her, but she's in school right now because she wanted more of the traditional experience. And yeah, life gets busy. Time passes quickly.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think I've now lived longer in the UK than I lived in Canada, and I'm Canadian originally, so
Yeah.
so yeah, you settle in a place and it's very easy to just stay there, get integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so when you travel abroad for your digital nomad excursions, do you get a specific? Because I know there's countries that are creating now digital nomad visas. Do you get a special visa for that, or do you just sort of take a tourist visa?
It depends how long we want to stay and what the country's rules are. The first time we came to the UK, for example, Americans can stay 6 months in the UK with no visa. So that was plenty of time for, well, I should say it wasn't our first trip to the UK. The first time we came to the UK as nomads, when we were staying in Scotland and later in London, um, we didn't need any visa. And of course, I'm not really working in the UK. I'm writing books, but generally people don't consider that working. You're not like taking anything out of the local economy. I'm just sitting on my laptop taking notes and stuff.
Right.
Um, so that wasn't necessary, but there are definitely digital nomad visas that you can get, and there are countries where you couldn't stay more than 30 days or so if you wanted to do that. So it varies from place to place.
Right. Okay. And do you worry about consistent internet when you travel, or is it more a matter of just as long as my laptop's working, I'm fine?
No, that is a factor, and we have had places that we intended to stay longer that where the internet did not necessarily perform as advertised, and we wound up having to leave and go to a different hotel or a different location. I mean, we never had like an entire country where we couldn't get internet, but there were hotels and different places that we've been in that it was problematic or where um, I remember in Bali, like you couldn't use they had internet, but it didn't work very well in the room, and I had to go down to like the cafe in the lobby and do my work from there. Actually, I had that same problem in Spain and one of the places I stayed in. So you adapt a little bit. If something is pressing and you have to have the internet, then you go down. You usually find a public spot that you can get to where you have a better signal.
Yeah, that's interesting. The internet cafe thing, which I think is still relatively common in the East, but has kind of gone out of fashion in the West, I think, hasn't it? I mean, we used to have them for a short time here, I think, but they've
Yeah,
sort of
I don't.
disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, by cafe, I was more talking about like Starbucks, but
Oh, okay, so
yeah,
actual cafe,
yeah,
yeah.
or like the hotels, like actual bar cafe combo thing. But yeah, when I years and years ago, when I was first backpacking around India, long before the digital nomad thing, yeah, I did spend enough time in cyber cafes there. I mean, that was how you could access the internet there. So
Right, right.
it was this is an interesting experience.
Yeah. So what's the favorite place, your most favorite place you've traveled to then?
Well, that's a hard choice. We've lived and traveled in 30 countries now. If I had to pick one, I would probably say South Korea.
Oh,
I
okay.
really, really loved it there. It was like so fascinating. The people were nice, the food is amazing, and it was a really, really cool place to visit. Um, Let's see. Of course, we like Scotland a lot, which is why we applied for residency here and are kind of basing our nomad journeys from here for the moment. Um, where else did we like a lot? Japan was a lot of fun. I really loved Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.
Hmm.
That's a really beautiful city. It's a lot of fun. If you ever get the chance, you should definitely visit there.
Oh, excellent. And now, I don't know, how long have you been in Scotland? How sort of settled? You mentioned your daughter's in school, so
This time around,
yeah.
Um, about 7 months, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
just 7 months. Okay. Because I
yeah.
was wondering, given the sort of ac accelerating geopolitical issues, let's say, where would you consider traveling next, and where would you not consider traveling? Well, some of them are obvious, I guess, but
Yeah, there were already countries that like we had planned to go to that developments definitely changed our plans. When we were uh leaving on our second bout of nomad journeys, was just when the invasion of Ukraine began, and we had originally been talking about going to Finland, and at that time, threats were made against Finland, and we thought, let's consider some other destinations. Um, I had friends in Finland, and they have an unusual sense of humor. And when I asked one of them if it would be a good idea, he said, "Yeah, come on down. We'll arm you up if we need to." So we actually wound up going to Zurich. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, at one point, I did want to see Lebanon. Probably not going to be going there anytime soon.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
I actually already finished the series where that would be a location anyway, but it'd still be cool to see. Yeah, I think right now in the current geopolitical environment, as you say, I would, generally avoid the whole Middle East for now. It's a very unfortunate and tense time. So for us, I think my work is very much focused on Europe and Asia. So I would probably be inclined to see more of Eastern Europe if I could. I thought we did see a lot of places in Eastern Europe, but I would always like to see more. I love the architecture there. It's like really speaks to me. Southeast Asia, I'd like to go back, like to see more of that. So those are probably my priorities.
Yeah.
East Asia also.
And so you mentioned your digital nomad journeys. So I mean inherently I would imagine you go out and come back to your base, but do you actually then you actually plan multiple stops before you come back? Is that how you
When we were living as digital nomads, we didn't have a home base. We just went from one place to another. The first time that we left, we actually did wind up returning to the U.S. after about maybe 6 or 7 months, because we wanted to get vaccines for COVID. It was growing increasingly out of control, and they were at that time we had hoped to just return to the UK and get vaccines there because we had been in the UK a few months ago, but they were only giving it to people outside our age group there. So in order to get it, we had to go back to the US, and then we found out, oh, there's going to be one for kids. We have a young child, or she was very young then, but it's not available yet. And because a lot of countries were requiring vaccines, we thought, okay, let's just wait and we'll get her a vaccine and then we'll go out again. Um, then after all that, yeah, we traveled another over a year, another 13, 14 months. And then we stopped back into the US for a while for various personal reasons. And now, yeah, now we're back in the UK again.
Yeah, I guess that must have been a difficult time to be a digital nomad. The vaccine was kind of required, wasn't it, to do any traveling?
Yeah, at the time we left, there was no vaccine, and so it wasn't a factor. We just took whatever precautions we could, masks and um, Purell and whatever, and but the situation was changing rapidly month to month, and we had to adapt to it a little bit.
So I noticed you haven't traveled much to South America. Do you set many of your? I mean, I've taken a look through your backlist a bit, and most of, like as you mentioned, most of your stories seem to revolve around mythology from Europe and the Middle East or Mediterranean. Are you thinking to incorporate anything from South America at some point?
Early on, I did want to incorporate something from South America. In fact, we took a trip to Mexico, um, which is obviously Central America, but we took a trip to Mexico because I wanted to include that as well. Um, Later, when I realized that, I'm just one person and I want this project to be manageable, I decided to constrain myself to stories from Europe and Asia. By that point, I'd already written Polynesian stories, and so I kind of lumped that in with the other stuff, but I decided not to do that for the sake of the sheer scope of the project just being too much for one person to do. I mean, writing all the mythologies in the world is just probably more than I could do in a time frame that is reasonable to me as an author. Like, I don't want to necessarily be doing the same project 50 years from now. And also to my audience, I think they deserve a conclusion, however long it takes to come to that.
So no thoughts on delving into mythologies from the Americas then either, I imagine, at this point.
I have read some books on that. I did some research on that, and it was appealing. But yeah, I finally I decided to cut that from the scope of any of my project and leave it to someone else to deal with that. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I
Um,
would like to visit South America just for the sheer pleasure of seeing, all the natural wonders there, but we have not been to South America.
um, I was wondering, you mentioned your minimalism of your lifestyle. Do you think this is something that is becoming more common and perhaps in the UK, even almost strongly encouraged by economic situations and things like that?
Well, I think that it becomes more common, and that for a lot of people it's probably a good thing, yeah, because the reality of the mass consumption economy is it's not really sustainable for most people. So I think minimalism is really all about intentionality. What you minimize the things that don't matter as much in your life, be it possessions or activities or whatever, in order to maximize the things that do. And for us, we realized that we don't want to have too much stuff. We want to have experiences. It's not that we don't own possessions. It's that we try to get, a few nice ones that really lend themselves to enhancing the quality of our life. So we don't invest in a lot of decorations or anything that we don't really need. We kind of make lists and revise those lists of what are our life priorities, and you come back to it every 6 months or year or whatever. You come back to those lists and say, have they changed? Is what you want from your life changing? Because it will, and it should. So like for us, seeing the world is both a pleasure and a goal. It has to do with my work, but it's also its own reward. I mean, we feel like we grow as people and we know more about life on Earth and humanity from all the places that we've been and traveled. And in order to do something like that, you also have to be willing to give something up, right? You can't, everybody has a finite amount of time and financial resources and mental energy. And, maybe you can't have a big house or a fancy car or all the possessions, and you have to decide what matters a lot to you. Um, as you read in my bio, my main hobbies are reading books, playing video games, and watching TV with my wife. So if we're not traveling, those are the things that I like to do. So I have a PS5. When we stopped here, we bought TVs because we like to watch TV. We all three of us like to watch TV. So um, those are things that are important to us. But other stuff, yeah, we don't have a lot of possessions. Also in the UK here, it's nice because furnished apartments are a common thing. So we don't have to own very much.
Right.
But living in the US, that's not so common, furnished apartments. Most people bring their own furniture, so it's a little bit more difficult moving around.
What about when you're traveling? Do you find furnished places then quite easily?
hmm Yeah, most of the places that we traveled, we found either furnished apartments or we lived in like apart hotels, where you have a little tiny kitchenette thing that you can make your small meals on and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, the minimalism thing is interesting because we've recently, well, dealing with, let's say, the loss of older members of the family and um, going through all the stuff that they've collected over the decades, literally multiple houses full. And it's actually much more let's say friendly to your children to have less stuff in some ways because you don't leave them as much of a mess to clean up.
Yeah, when my dad passed, we had to clean out all of that stuff and saw things that I am quite certain that he had not seen in years. And if you can go an entire calendar year without seeing or needing something, I think you have to ask, does this thing actually add any value to your life, or is it just clutter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, what video game do you relax with, and what's your go-to?
Well, my favorite genre of video games is what's called Souls-likes, which are action RPGs that tend to have a steep difficulty curve, but be very rewarding because of the skill and the patience they require. So those
Okay.
are generally my favorites.
And
Sometimes I play adventure games too.
okay. And with your Netflix, do you sit down and watch some more fantasy, sci-fi, or do you like avoid that completely and go with different genres?
No, most of what we watch is speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, or horror. Yeah. Sometimes also historical stuff. But I tend not to get terribly interested in just like modern stuff with no speculative elements. Every once in a while, but not too much. I'm very nerdy, I guess. So that's what tends to capture my interest.
Do you have a recommendation from recent watching?
There is a K-drama called Alchemy of Souls that we are currently watching for the third time,
Wow.
uh, which ought to indicate to you just how much we like it. It's really one of my all-time favorite shows.
Excellent. Yeah, my wife's got into K-drama. Well, she's moved away from it a little bit now, but she was into it for like half a year at least, just
Mm.
binging everything. Mostly doctor shows though, so she stayed within her own field.
Niche.
Um, and speaking of stories, then, so you in your bio you claim you got your sort of first interest in this whole sort of fantasy area and mythology area via Lord of the Rings, um,
Mhm.
reading it with your parents. So what was that? What was that like, and what was your inspiration? Well, what inspired you from the story to move forward with that?
Honestly, I was so young that I feel like I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't into fantasy. But I do remember like learning and realizing that Tolkien had drawn so much inspiration from especially Norse and also Celtic and Finnish mythology. And like as a young person in my early teens, um, the internet started to become a thing, and you know spending so much time delving into encyclopedias of mythology and researching like every different mythology that I could find online, thinking about like if this adaptation of mythology had become this thing that had so influenced my childhood. When I thought of myself as a writer and as a teller of stories, I became really interested in mythology to ground fantasy. Uh, and it was only later that I went from just using elements of mythology in my fantasy to actually writing retellings of mythology as the fantasy. But I spent a lot of my youth like obsessed with mythology and looking at all of these stories that I could get.
And so what was that point, let's say, when you went from just sort of devouring the various mythologies and understanding and interpreting them to the point where you felt, maybe I should write a series of novels on this.
Oh, you mean when did I first want to be a writer, or when did it
Essentially, yeah, that's a
become?
short way of saying it.
Uh, I think I wrote my first fantasy book, if you want to call it that, when I was in first grade. I mean, I think the book was about 5 pages, but it was kind of just what I always wanted to do, and I always wanted to be a storyteller. For a while, I wanted to tell stories through the mode of video games because, as I told you, I like those a lot, and I really got influenced in my storytelling by certain video games. And I studied for a little while computer programming enough to know I don't actually want to be a computer programmer. Like, it's neat and all, but it wasn't rewarding enough to me. And it was kind of like a sidetrack thing. And I really thought about what I wanted for my life, which was to tell the stories. And then I thought, I came back to my original idea, which was just writing books.
I mean, you've been writing for a while. You have quite a good sized backlist.
Mhm.
Um, well, when did you first publish, and sort of what was your process when you, let's say you finished the first book, and you decided you wanted to publish it? Did you have in mind, like at that point, that you were going to self-publish? Did you go to a small press? Did you look for an agent? What was your process there?
Um, Yeah, actually, I did not originally have self-publishing in mind. In fact, I had gone to a school, publishing school for traditional publishing, because I had always heard, a writer can't make enough to live on, so you got to have another job. So I thought, well, what am I good at? I got out of college and I thought, well, I'm good at writing, so I studied editing. And I got out of this editing school, and they were like, okay, so to get a good job as an editor, you're going to have to first move to New York, and then editorial assistants, because all the jobs are in New York, and editorial assistants are, paid a bag of chips and a, nice soda maybe or something.
All right.
So I was gonna have to get like 60 roommates or something to survive there. And none of that sounded all that appealing. And I wound up thinking, what do I really want to do with my life? And that turned into a backpacking trip around India where I met my future wife. And part of the backpacking trip was I was researching a project that I wanted to write about Indian myth and architecture, and all that was really fascinating to me. And so I was backpacking around India, and I came back and made the decision that I wasn't going to get into traditional publishing as an editor. And I started working more on the novel that I had been planning and that was influenced by this. And by the time I was ready to publish it, I was looking for an agent, and I met this guy, David Galgren, who started talking about the self-publishing revolution that had occurred with Kindle. I didn't know anything about this, so I started talking to him and learning about that. And um, then, after considering the appeal of it and hearing some horror stories from some traditionally published authors that had not necessarily gotten the treatment that they should have gotten, from how good I thought their writing was, I thought, this will give me more creative control if I try publishing it myself, and I did that. And that actually, I published that book and several others in a sequel series, which is it's not currently available, but my first books were set in Southeast Asia. So it had a combination of Indian and Southeast Asian influences.
So when was your first book published then?
2012, I think.
2012. Okay.
I think it was 2012. So yeah, I just kind of went from there. Eventually, finished that series, went on to write some science fiction, and then went on to start working on Norse mythology, which is actually the thing that I became most known for later after doing all of that. So the Norse mythology really drew more attention than most of my previous projects, and I'm actually working on a new rewritten and vastly expanded version of that right now.
It's interesting. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of stuff on, let's say, Greek Roman mythology and Egyptian mythology. There's a fair amount of Norse though, isn't there? But I guess maybe less
It's become
fictionalized.
very popular lately. I think part of that has to do with Marvel. Um,
Okay, right,
but it's become very popular, and I think that's what really helped me is people, they get into it and then they want more. So that's really helpful.
right.
Interspersed with this, like I said, I published one sci-fi series, and then I met another author, Jess Morin, and we hit it off as friends and decided to do some collaborative projects. And we he helped me expand my original sci-fi series, Sons of Angels, and then asked me to write a spinoff for one of his series, and that became a 12-book series. So that was my main foray into science fiction, which I guess is total between the two series, 17 books and a whole bunch of short stories. So um, it's been a little while since I worked on those projects, but they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working on those.
I guess editing must have really helped you. Like the editing background probably helped you as you went to self-publish as well.
I think so. I mean, of course, I still hired a developmental editor, copy editor, proofreader, all those things I still hired out. But I did work freelance doing editing myself using those skills for a while when I was supplementing my income too. And I think knowing things about how the industry works and standards and stuff, it certainly doesn't hurt.
How have you found the post-publication process, i.e., the marketing and promotion and sales side of things?
It's hard. I mean, as a self-published author, you are running a business also, in addition to just writing the books. And there are many times when I think all of us, or many of us, feel like, oh, I'd rather just be writing it. I'd rather just write these and turn them in and have a publisher take care of this stuff.
Yeah. Do you have any one piece of advice for let's say new indie authors that they should or shouldn't do when it comes to book promotion? Like when they're just starting out,
Book
let's say they've got their
promotion?
first 1 to 3 books. Well, book sales, book promotion, that kind of thing.
Okay. I guess the first thing would be like be flexible. Like whatever worked 10 years ago is not working now. Whatever worked 5 years ago, after that, it's not working. You you have to be willing to adapt to changing markets and trends and that kind of thing. So uh, there was a point where you could pretty easily just make the first book in your series free, and people would devour it and go on and buy the other books. And this worked really well as a loss leader. That strategy, I still use it some, but it's not nearly as effective as it used to be. Unfortunately, you have a lot of people that will take free books and then they'll get more than they could ever read in their lifetime and just have a selection of free books available to them, but they'll never actually read your book. And that's unfortunate. So now you need different ways to cut through the noise. And I think as a corollary to that, I guess the other advice would be, when you are trying to market, don't be spammy, don't be a jerk about it. Don't be all about me, me, me all the time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have a newsletter. I think most authors have a newsletter, and the assumption is that if somebody signs up for my newsletter, they probably want to hear about my work, but you still don't want to necessarily hammer them with something to buy every time you talk to them. So it's kind of
Yeah, I
jammy.
think it's the challenge of the social part of social media, isn't it? Especially people of my generation and older. Um, we don't use social media a lot, and when we do, it's mostly talking to family. So then you're told, "Oh, get on social media to promote your books," and you don't know what to do because you haven't built a network. So, so you just spam, "Oh, I got a new book out," and then people get tired of it eventually, very quickly, I think. And
Yeah, they do, and there's a lot of noise on social media, and for me, as a introverted person, social media can be a little hard. I mean, it takes mental energy for me to go on
mm,
Facebook, or I just recently started an Instagram channel, with the intention of doing book reviews and stuff. But it does take energy for me that sometimes I feel like, oh, I could be using this energy to do something else. Um, but if you're not out there, then it's hard for people to know who you are and hard for them to discover you. So,
right. So that's interesting because I'm quite the same way. And so how do you motivate yourself to continue on? Because I will start sometimes on social media and then I'll just like forget about it or give it up for a while. I mean, what is it that sort of drives you to continue that process?
well, so of course, Facebook was big for a while. Facebook, I used to try to engage with my fans there. I do less now because of Facebook's changing practices that they tend not to show your post to your audience anymore unless you pay them for every post.
Right.
And I'm not in a financial situation where I can pay every time I want to talk to my audience. So um, now I have Patreon, where people can follow me for free, or they can even add financial support. And I think that Patreon will, if they sign up for it, that they'll get emailed every time I have new content. So that motivates me because I feel like I'm actually reaching people and talking to people who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in.
Right.
So I feel definitely much more motivated on Patreon. As I said, I just recently, like I don't know, 2 weeks ago, started Instagram after resisting it for a long time. So it's too early in the process for me to really say whether it's gonna work for me. People like to watch reels nowadays, so I'm kind of dealing with my getting used to being on camera and talking instead of writing about everything. Um, and that's been a new experience. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it's weird. Like I'm not experienced with it. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have heard Instagram has one of the better interaction or engagement rates for social media, but whether that's significant or not, because it tends to be just more or less like hit the like button kind of thing, doesn't it? Uh,
yeah, I'm not trying to sell books directly so much as find a way to interact with readers and just make connections with people, because I think that that's also like important. I mean, not only from the perspective of, yeah, okay, I'm selling books, but also of just like a human connection to
right, yeah.
your reader base. For me, traveling all around the world and living mostly in my laptop, I mean, it would be very easy to not be connected to anyone other than my wife and daughter. And the hope, though, is that your writing and your art is reaching people, and
Right.
so you want to have some connection to the people you're reaching, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it is again the social part of social media needs to
Yeah.
take precedence, doesn't it? So we have mentioned your backlist. You are primarily a fantasy author, but you have written the Sins of Angels, co-written the Sins of Angels sci-fi series and the Black Ocean Astral Prime.
Yes.
And is it recently the LitRPG, the Cthulhu series you've started?
Yeah. That was actually so the same author, Jess Moran, at the time, several years ago, was telling me he was writing some of this stuff as a pen name, and I like video games and I like books, and I should try combining them. And I said, well, I don't know about that, but I'll give it a try. And I published it under a pen name. I don't know, like 2019 or something. And we only recently made the decision to just bring everything back under the name Matt Larkin. Like my sci-fi was published under M.A. Larkin for a long time. My lit RPG was published under TK Kato, and of course my fantasy under Matt Larkin. And then we eventually just decided, I think, hope that I'm established enough that we can trust people to understand that I write in more than one genre. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
Early on, there was a theory that it's better if you're developing different genres to have different pen names for them. I think also there was a factor that I realized that, so much of my time is taken up working on my mythological retellings that I don't have a lot of time to actually develop three different personas. So
Yeah,
better to
exactly.
just be honest and say, yeah, this is also me. Also, I got I got a email from a author friend, a frequent collaborator, asking me about Sins of Angels at one point. Hey, is this also your work? And I was like, I didn't even realize that was a question, that Amy Larkin and Matt Larkin are the same person. So I thought, you know what? If one of my own friends and author collaborators who I've like done cross promotion with for the last 5 years wasn't sure, maybe I should just be honest and say, yeah, that's me. So
Yeah, I think ultimately it does come down to that, well, to two things you mentioned. One is just the time it takes to try and manage multiple personas in the author
yeah.
world. And then, like you said, if people don't know it's you, I mean, some people will be inspired to try your other content just because it's you, which is hopefully what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the original, actually, that since we're talking about technology, the original motivation for separating them actually is related to technology, which is that the algorithms that Amazon uses to recommend books, could wind up hurting you if they
Right.
recommend your books and they're too different in genres, and then people don't click on them or don't buy them or whatever, and then they think this book is a dud and they bury it. So there was the fear of that, and we used that to separate the books, thinking it would be better. But I think those books have been out long enough that I'm not really still worried about that.
Yeah, I have interviewed an author who had a problem like that. I think she had a young adult science fiction series, dystopian, that she also classed as lit RPG. And once it started taking off in the lit RPG category, she couldn't get any recognition from the algorithm in the YA category, and it
Yeah.
sort of sunk her in the other category. Yeah. But your one thing that you do have going for you is that most of your work has similar themes. At least you're dealing with mythology. Um,
Mhm.
but I was curious to start with. I mean, the one I started with reading was the first book of the Sins of Angels, the
Wings of
sci-fi
Angels.
series. But
Yeah.
first, I wanted to actually, because I just discovered actually before as I was preparing for the interview, I guess I didn't do my homework early enough. But I realized you did the LitRPG Cthulhu series, and I'm quite interested because I haven't been able to get any very many LitRPG authors interested in doing an interview. So since I have you here, what was your experience writing that, and how did you approach it?
Uh, it would Jeff essentially dared me and he said right now this is selling well, you like these things, give it a try even if you're hesitant. And um because I did like those things and respected him and he was doing it, I did it, and it was an interesting experience. It was much more challenging than I expected. Um it didn't come naturally to me. It required different kinds of skills. And it's weird for me because I thought, okay, well, I've read the original stories that it's based on, the Lovecraftian mythos, and I read lots of books and I love books and I've played lots of RPGs and I love them, but trying to mesh them together was weird, and it was a really unique experience for me. If it would have sold really well, I might have written more. But un unfortunately, I actually spent quite a lot on that cover, and wasn't necessarily enough to justify me in sales to justify me doing something like that again in the near future.
Yeah, it does seem from what I've been following a little bit, a lot of the popular lit RPG authors seem to first publish serially on other forums. I
Do they?
think
Okay.
what is it called? Royal Road, I think, is one. So
Okay.
my what I've been kind of feeling is that they create a following even before they start putting their book out as a, as a full um, package, let's say. That just seems, I don't know for sure if that's true of everyone, but it's something I've kind of observed from a lot of them, which is interesting because it is a little bit different from other genres, I think, which don't necessarily have the same depth to that process.
That would make sense. And yeah, it did feel like it was writing in like a whole third genre, right? Like, I mean, because I'm used to dealing with fantasy and I'm used to dealing with science fiction, and in both cases I kind of intermeshed some horror into that. And here I thought this is kind of like, here I'm talking about in the Cthulhu series, the augmented reality and horror and meshing them together. And it sounds like it should be the same thing, but it really felt like doing a different genre. Um, so again, I think it's a question of how much time you want to put into learning um, the art of each genre.
Right. And just for the listeners who aren't really familiar with lit RPG, maybe you could just give a quick sort of summary of what the genre is and how it differs from, let's say, sci-fi or fantasy.
Well, so it's kind of like imagining the character, the point of view character is in a video game. And in my case, it's kind of meta, like the character is a video game tester who is hired to come test this augmented reality experience in a Lovecraft themed park. And So he's wearing these AR glasses like I don't know, like you've probably seen these new pictures of Zuckerberg and these gigantic glasses, right? And he's wearing these and he's going around and interacting with these Lovecraftian stories that he's also read in the past. He was a fan of, cosmic horror and having these experiences. And so in the game, he's seeing on his AR display numbers pop up like health and stats and stuff like for an RPG game. And he's interacting and collecting items and it feels like a game. And then it starts getting weird, like things that the game shouldn't be able to do seem bleeding into real life. And it naturally, I guess, because of the subject matter as a Lovecraftian horror thing, it really needed to be kind of a psychological thing too, where the character is no longer quite sure what's real and what's going on.
Right, which it probably isn't that hard for augmented reality eventually. We'll get there and we'll probably experience this ourselves at some point, won't we?
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and I guess for listeners who aren't quite sure still, I suppose Jumanji would be the newest two Jumanji movies would be excellent examples of lit RPG where they I don't know, have you seen the Jumanji movies?
I haven't seen them, but yeah, I think you're right from what I know about them. I think Ready Player One was probably also similar. I honestly haven't seen it either, but I've heard it's good.
Yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I think people who love the book like the movie less, but since I didn't read the book first, I like the movie more. Um, yeah, I think one thing that the Ready Player One didn't have was the sort of leveling ability. They did have the immersive, like otherworld experience. So
Mm.
how did you manage that? Because that is one of the things in lit RPG that I suppose, from what I understand, needs to be there in some way. Is this kind of obvious leveling up of the character? Did you do it sort of as a video game, like you mentioned, with your head up display and saying, "Oh, you have, level 2 now," or whatever?
Yeah, I did it like that, and I had like a spreadsheet, a Google Drive spreadsheet where I was tracking whatever information went from scene by scene. He's at this many hit points, and he's got these stats and whatever. Um, Beyond that, because I had only read a little bit of the genre just to try to rise to Jeff's challenge. Like I don't think I ever finished any books in there. Um, I definitely wasn't an expert and I definitely wasn't executing it in the ways that probably like the really popular lit RPG authors like Alan Kong were doing. Um, and maybe I should have, but I felt like also making it my own and taking it in my own direction because my subject matter was unusual. I think usually these lit RPGs are more like traditional fantasy and science fiction things, um, video game worlds, and this was like some unusual blending of augmented reality and horror, and so I wanted to make it my own.
One thing I was wondering, because you have mentioned your co-writing with J.S. Morin. How did that come about, and what's the process you go through with co-writing? This is something I've always wondered. I've done a few experiments with smaller pieces with people. To be honest, mostly in sort of a campfire structure where there's like seven of us going around in a circle writing chapters, which is weird by itself. But in the co-author, yeah, just let us know how that worked.
Um, well, we knew each other from a writing workshop that we ran together, and I discovered later that I had actually had one of his books, and after having met him, then I went and read it, and um, after we became friends and we got on a bit, I told him, I liked his book and his style, and I was looking for somebody at that time to help me take Sons of Angels and kind of level it up and move it in a little bit of a different direction because I was focusing at that point, realizing I wanted to focus my main career on my eschaton cycle of mythological retellings. And so I wanted somebody that was more expert in the sci-fi genre, which was his main genre, to handle that. And after some discussion, his company took over publishing that for me. We revised the original four books, expanded them. It became a five-book series. We did that. And then we had such a good time doing that he asked me to write a sequel series to his Black Ocean series to further expand the lore and the world building and develop it. Now he's got like 5 series in Black Ocean, so it's a really expansive universe. It's been very, very popular for him. As far as the question about the physical process, we Zoom like this, just like what we're doing, and Google Drive. We had Google Sheets and Google Docs, and we would go back and forth and do world building and planning or whatever. And once everything was planned out, then we would have certain sections assigned to each other, and usually we would either simultaneously be writing our different sections, or I would write the first bits and then he would go in and fill in whatever bits were for him. Also, Jeff has an engineering background, so he could add a lot of realism to the technology aspects of it and the science aspects. So often I would just leave notes like, science this up for me, please, or whatever. So because of course my background is in philosophy and history and mythology and these things. So, I do some research, but it doesn't replace, actually being a sciencey person.
Right. So just out of curiosity, where did you originally meet then? Did you go like a book fair or
It
some
was an
kind of writing
online
group?
writing
Right.
workshop that we were both
Okay.
part of. Yeah.
So,
The first time we met in person was, I don't remember actually. It was a while ago. I don't remember where the first time we met him in person. At one point, we came to visit them. That time they were living in New England, and we came to visit them and hung out with them. So later they moved to California.
so as we've mentioned, I mean, fantasy was your primary genre, and you have the eschaton cycle, which is a sort of huge mythological world, I guess, within Earth that
Yes.
mixes European and Mediterranean mythologies in a sort of realism.
Yeah, it's a cross of so I have a bunch of different cycles or like separate series that all interconnect with each other, and each one is themed around a different mythologies. So there's Norse, Greek, Celtic, um, uh, and then Southeast Asian and Polynesian, and then with plans that have already been kind of revealed through the connections to the other series for also East Asian and Eastern European and a bunch of stuff, all interconnected together. So it's kind of this massive web.
Hence the drawings on the board that I can see behind you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a gigantic whiteboard here with all kinds of notes about my particularly about the Norse project that I'm currently in the middle of redoing.
Excellent. And then since this a science fiction podcast primarily, your Sins of Angels sort of carries on with mythological themes.
Hmm.
A little bit more on the religious side, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Focusing on a concept of angels and there's mention of God, but there's not any God shown up yet. I mean, my introduction to this was Echoes of Angels, which is book 1 of the Sins of Angels series, which is I guess you could call it a vast space opera in a way, couldn't you? Because it does literally
Yeah,
cover dozens of galaxies in a way.
yeah,
Yeah. So what was your inspiration for this? And so you've taken a much sort of, I guess, in some ways narrower, although still eschatological, if I pronounce that right, um, uh, direction on that as well. So just how did you approach that, and how did you come up with the idea for it?
yeah. I mean, you mentioned that. I think yeah, I think all of my work really, even Black Ocean and Sons of Angels, do involve sort of eschatological themes. Um, but the initial approach to Sons of Angels was honestly just taking a whole bunch of different sci-fi ideas that I had and kind of blending them into the same universe over time. Like the earliest ideas for it probably came from um, building Lego sets actually for one of my friends growing up was really into Legos, and he had these um, Space Police Legos. I don't remember what they're actually called. I think they were Space Police. And so we used to build these ships and all that. And I, being the inveterate storyteller, was telling stories about whatever he would build. And, it kind of started out that way. And, as I was getting older, then I was watching a bunch of sci-fi TV shows that were in, the 80s and 90s. Babylon 5 in particular really kind of fascinated me. This great grand epic struggle between light and darkness, and so that was an early influence. Farscape probably influenced it a little bit. But Sins of Angels really became its own thing. Like it's got, especially the first couple books, also have this sort of gritty, almost cyberpunkish vibe on this former prison colony, and it's all polluted and nasty. And most of the action takes place on this planet in the first two books. But as you said, yeah, as the series goes on, it's hopping among different planets and spaceships, and there's all kinds of stuff. So I didn't really necessarily obey typical genre lines. I mean, it's kind of a space opera and kind of a dystopian thing, kind of cyberpunk. It's got a lot of different elements where I just took a lot of things that I was interested in, meshed them into one giant blender.
So world building, I guess, nerdy issue or question. So when do you see? So it is set from humanity moving into the future in a
Mhm.
way, kind of a dark light, dark way. How far in the future do you see this series set? I mean, it's at least 3,000 years, but is it?
So it's yeah, the series is set 3,100 years after the end of Earth,
Right.
which no specific time frame is given, but presumably it's sometime within the next 100 years or so. Deliberately, that stuff is kept kind of vague so that the end of the world is never like explained exactly what when it happened or what. And I think there was the intention that someday I might write that. I don't know whether I'll come back to that series. I might if there's demand enough for it. It was a fun series to work on. Um, so, I would never rule anything out. And I had at the time left open the doors to write, prequels or sequels or whatever to the series.
Right. One thing I was wondering reading this, because I suppose, as I mentioned on recent podcasts, that to become an interest of mine is the reality behind the stories, I guess, um, and new discoveries that we make that sort of are beginning to suggest, well, maybe not all of the mythological stories were necessarily mythological. Do you, so some of the examples, I guess, so when I was younger, I think there was the discovery of the city of Troy, for example, the claims potentially that they found the tomb of Gilgamesh. There's some debate on that.
Mhm.
And then some of the other things that in, let's say, Sumerian tablets suggesting historical events that we're finding evidence for. Do you um build any of this kind of thing into your stories? Is this sort of where your any of your interest lies, or is it purely a sort of an unraveling the mythology and where that originates?
Well, it sounds like you're asking about euhemerism, like the theory that a lot of mythology is based on actual human events that have been built up over time and stories to become larger than life, but they were based on real events. And I do toy with that, I think, a lot in my work. Like in my Norse mythology work, for example, the Aesir gods are actually people who eventually manage to get semi-immortality and convince other people that they're gods. Um, so it's definitely a theme that I tend to use uh, throughout my work, where things, a lot of the mythological figures are humans or at least people that have become larger than life in the telling or by their deeds. In regards specifically to Sons of Angels, The theming is that these angels either and I don't want to give any spoilers, so I'll just say that they either created the angel myths that people on Earth are familiar with, or else they have adapted them and become that in order to influence people. And I think that that's it's something. Have you seen Babylon 5?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's something like with the Vorlons, where it's like they have influenced races all over the galaxy to manipulate and take advantage of their mythology. A early major influence on my work was Dune, and you see this in the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. Also, they created all these prophecies about messiahs coming, so that whenever they actually needed to have a messiah, it was set up there. Whatever planet it happened to happen on, they had the foundations for it. It happened to be on Arrakis, but it could have been other places if they needed it to.
Given without going too political, given the, let's say, issues that our current Western society is having, at least structurally, do you feel does it feel at all to you like that kind of thing has kind of been introduced to us? And maybe that's where these ideas for these stories come from, is that um we have been, like, let's say, I don't know, prepared for certain ideas, or we've been given certain um I don't know, interpretations of reality that maybe are meant to inspire us towards a certain direction of behavior, for example.
Yeah.
Or does that seem too conspiratorial?
No. Frank Herbert put that forward with the Dune books in the 60s, right? This idea of the danger of following messianic leaders and that if you blindly follow any leader, you are opening yourself up to taking every word that comes out of their mouth as gold, as spoken from a prophet. And yeah, I think that is a danger. And I think science fiction can be at its best and its most useful when it's looking forward to trends in society and societal issues and saying, maybe look at this before we wind up in this situation. Maybe, I think social science fiction can be some of the most valuable and most important science fiction. And when next I read sci-fi, that's kind of more what I was hoping to do. Sons of Angels is more, it's a bit philosophical, but it's also kind of just this insane action story um, without with some social commentary about I guess the dangers of that's also you've got these angels as these messianic leaders and people just blindly follow whatever they're told. And there's a danger in that, it's caused a cognitive shift in the way people process information so that even when they're gone, people are changed, right? They don't want to hear that whatever they believed is not whatever they thought it was.
Yeah, yeah. Because you mentioned Warning from the 60s, and of course you can even go back further than that to books like well, obviously what's been talked about a lot is 1984 and
Yeah.
Brave New World, Aldous Huxley as well. Um, do you, in some ways that makes me a little bit depressed because there has been warnings
Yeah,
for
of course.
close to a century now,
Yeah.
and yet we still haven't heeded those warnings, it appears, or at least not enough of us.
Yeah. Well, you can't you can't control people, right? And it's
No, yeah.
that people are
Well,
going to do what they want to do, and I think um, that is kind of what these books are predicting, right? It's that the public as a whole, a person is smart, but the
people are not.
people as a
Yeah.
whole can be driven. They build up momentum to go in a certain direction. It's not easy to change that direction. You need like a whole paradigm shift in thinking to pull people out of whatever direction they're going to. And societally, I think we see a lot of dangers really, really sort of building up in the West now, between the way the economies are really kind of shifting,
Right.
and like accelerating how fast the money is all flowing in one direction nowadays. And maybe this started 40 years ago, but it's getting faster and faster, where average people are struggling harder and harder, and it's you know each generation is finding it harder to be financially stable than the last. And then climate, like, I've got family in Florida. They've just been hit by two gigantic hurricanes in 10 days. Um, and yeah, okay, it's Florida, it's hurricane season, but it wasn't like this before. It wasn't like this even 5 years ago. It wasn't like this, right? So things are changing in the world, and if we continue to ignore every warning, then eventually we wind up, yeah, in some of these dystopian things that we've been warned about. In 1984, you mentioned, like, when I read that, okay, all the stuff that was going on was horrible, but the real horror of the book is the end.
Yeah.
You realize, they're trying to overthrow this dystopian society, and the message that you're left with at the end is, no, it's too late. You can't. Right.
Yeah,
It's
the
too
system
late.
already
You
has
let it go
complete
too
control.
far, and there's no reset button now.
Yeah.
You got to hope we're not getting there.
I Yeah, I kind of might feel that we already passed that point, but maybe I'm pessimistic. Because you do wonder on intentionality with this, and that's where I guess the conspiracy theories come in, and the where the boundary between reality and conspiracy is for people at our level is difficult to fathom. Uh, um, for example, we know that they've been experimenting with cloud seeding around the world, California, in Dubai, etc. And you got to wonder with the climate system being global, whether butterfly effects happen from that, right? You change the amount of rain you get in one area, and you have a butterfly effect that maybe results in a Category 5 tornado in Florida. So, I mean, we do say we do the message is largely um, just sort of consumerism and abuse of materials, whatever. But there, you do have to wonder at some point, um, not intentionality to cause harm, but intentional actions that cause unexpected issues. But maybe I'm going a little bit out there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that kind of thing, but
I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not informed enough about what you're talking about at this particular moment to have an opinion. Um, but I do think, in a more general level, I think people have a responsibility when they are, people, corporations, scientists, whatever, when they're doing their experiments, to do them responsibly, think about the consequences, study them. Um, I think the world definitely has a problem with apathy, with people doing things, without caring what the long-term consequences are. Um,
yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Yeah. Especially as a former scientist, I would agree with that. I have seen it. When I was still in research, I remember talking to some colleagues about, well, it was specifically, I think, about climate change and concerns for it. And I remember one guy was saying, "Oh, I work on producing drugs that help fight diseases, so I don't need to worry about climate change because I'm doing my part already." And I was just like, well, kind of we have to do the parts for all the world. We can't just do one part, right? I mean, each person, I mean, it's a big task, it's a big ask as well, but we have to all be aware of all aspects essentially, or else things slip through the cracks, basically, don't
I
they?
mean, yeah, you do live on planet Earth, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. To take it lighter for one moment, you did have psychics in Sins of Angels, which played a very significant role. They weren't just there as filler or interesting parts. So what inspired that whole process? And I don't know how much you want to. I guess maybe it's not a spoiler, but I'll let you tell it if you want. Sort of the need for the psychics and why you wanted to put them in the story.
Dune and Babylon 5. Babylon 5 has telepaths that are really essential to the story and made me interested in that. And of course, in Dune, a psychic ability is necessary to navigate space, and that seemed like a really, it seemed to fit really well thematically into the story of the angels. Dropping humanity into a universe where they now have technology far beyond their own understanding. Their technology is thousands of years beyond what they themselves could have created. And now they can use it and sometimes replicate it, but they don't necessarily understand how all of it works. And they have this system, the conduit that connects all the solar systems, but it's so vast and so complex, like quantum tunnels, that without psychic ability, you could never navigate it. You just get lost in the universe. So that idea, I think, came from Dune and an adaptation of how the Spacing Guild works.
How do you envision psychic abilities? Let's say if you're relating them to human abilities now, like would you consider them to be massively heightened intuition or something entirely different?
I think, yeah, I think the oracular abilities that we talk about in the series is like, yeah, massively heightened intuition, like feeling your way through which way you need to go to get to your destination. I think, yeah, massively heightened intuition is an excellent description. Yeah, that
Hmm.
sounds exactly right. What I had there, yeah. In my eschaton cycle, I also have the sight, which is it can also be intuition, but in some cases the characters are seeing like actual visions of the future. Um, and I don't really have that exactly in Sons of Angels. It's more like yeah, just feeling your way towards how you need to go.
Interesting. So we are starting to get a bit long. So I was going to move into the what I call the big questions, which maybe
Okay.
not so much bigger than our other questions, but
These were big
more
questions about
more
the
big
future of the world.
questions.
All right.
Exactly. What I was thinking is that with your main character Rachel in Sins of Angels, I guess I consider her journey from one perspective at least can be summarized by like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, um,
Yep.
to some
Pretty
degree.
accurate. Yeah.
So she has a pursuit of the truth, which is causing, and you do deal with this, at least as in dialogue between some of the characters in the first book. Um, it's causing a lot of harm, and from the blurbs on the future books, it gets worse.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what I'm wondering is, do you think can the cost of truth be too high sometimes, or is it necessary? Um, what I'm wondering is, um, if we move too far down a path away from truth, is it as a necessary correction, and that's just the price we have to pay to get back on the right line, or or is it the case that maybe we should just coexist on that,
Live the
false
lie.
thread that
Yeah.
people are happy with?
I mean, yeah, I think that's one of the philosophical themes behind the series is like, how far are you willing to go to get to the truth? And she causes an enormous amount of harm getting to it. And I guess if I had to make the call, then I would probably come down on the side of, yeah, she causes all this harm, but isn't it better to know the truth than to continue following the lie, right? I mean, because following the lie is going to have consequences eventually too, right?
Right.
If you take that far enough, there are going to be consequences, whether that's the same level of, cosmic destruction or not. It might be in the end. I mean, wouldn't you rather know reality and make your choices based on how it is? Even if some people are going to resist that knowledge.
Yeah. I guess the nice thing about doing this in stories is we generally have an idea of what the truth in some way is, or at least which character is going to present us with the truth. Whereas in reality, um, a character like Rachel could be pursuing the truth, but might be completely wrong,
She might, yeah.
in which case she's causing a huge amount of damage
And chaos,
and
yeah.
for no good reason. And that's a
Yeah.
big challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of leads me to the second question. So it seems obvious in the modern era that our political structures feel they have the solution to the world's problems and have a moral imperative to push ahead, which is similar to Rachel's character. New information and new ideas be damned, it seems. So equally obvious, I suggest, is that the majority of us on the ground, we pay the price for their ideas. If they're right, we reap the benefits. If they're wrong, we pay the price. Um, and in many cases, what they're doing is ignoring the totality of human experience in favor of their narrow perception of human experience. First of all, I guess, do you think that's a reasonable assessment, or am I completely off the rocker? I'll start with that first.
I mean, I think so without having a specific example to address, but I think that honestly, I'm not even sure that my experience is of what I've seen is even that much altruistic as you're giving it. I'm not sure that necessarily a lot of the political structures believe what they're espousing, even so much as they believe in espousing the views that they think is going to get them the votes to continue their own power.
Hmm.
Um, they they have generally self-interest before altruism, I think, in most cases. Now, there are exceptions, of course. I do think that there are people out there legitimately trying to make the world a better place, but I don't think that's the standard.
Yeah, well, I'll agree with that, definitely on the individual level. But I do wonder, I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt, I guess, to the structures. I like
I want to do
yeah.
that.
Well, it's easy to complain and it's easy to build conspiracies. So I want to approach it from, let's say that they're actually doing what they think is right. But I feel maybe they've gotten tunnel vision, and they've sort of ignoring the rest of the information that's coming in. Let's say I'm giving them the most positive viewpoint I can put on them. um, but in that case, let's assume that is would might be correct. How what do you think we could do to hold the powers accountable for their act? This is one thing that I think it's really missing, is that the powers are never held accountable anymore. It used to be, I think, in the distant past that there was some kind of accountability, at least in some systems. We don't hold ours accountable at all anymore, and in fact, they usually fail upwards, it seems. So, can you imagine any way that we, the citizens, could influence this system that could start holding them accountable?
Well, I think in order to do that, you'd need a bit of a paradigm shift in the public too, right? You
Mm,
have a lot of people, and I don't know how it works in all countries, but I know in the US, like you have a lot of people that identify with a particular political party and are going to go with that party no matter what, and for good reason, because a vote to anybody that's not one of two parties is essentially a wasted vote. It doesn't do anything, and historical evidence suggests that you would need in order to escape from this rigid bipartisanism, you would need there to be a legitimate third option. And for that to be true, you need like a bunch of the public all at once to suddenly decide, okay, we want a third path to follow.
right. So
So
I
I don't
do.
know how you, I don't know how you get that. It's kind of like
Mm,
you were saying about 1984. Have we already passed the point where it's easy to correct something? I mean, the government, the courts, corporations, it's all intertangled, right? There is no accountability because all of the power structures are supporting themselves, and there's nothing outside of that.
right. Yeah, so I kind of agree with that. And what I'm wondering is, though, since I do believe the system is really geared, I mean, in the UK recently, our recent election really kind of highlighted, I think, that in that, well, had we had what people will call proportional representation, the results would have been significantly different. The same party still would have won, but the entire structure of the House of Parliament would have been different. Um, and so what I'm wondering is the system already locked into its form? And then I'm thinking, so in terms of the public, what the public can do is start building from the ground up, from the bottom up, rather than
From the top down.
currently worrying about the top down. Yeah. And so building our own networks, our own support groups, our own neighborhoods, and then that voice becomes strong enough and also active enough in a reasonable way that we can start once again bringing accountability back to the politicians. I'm not sure they ever
Well,
feel
yeah,
that, but
that makes sense in a, I mentioned that you would need a paradigm shift within the public's mindset, and I think that
right,
might be the only way you can accomplish that is um, we no longer have the ability in the US or the UK to simply rearrange the government from the top down.
right,
Um, we can't just take power away from those in power. We can't take it away from the corporations. We can't do any of that right now. But yeah, at a grassroots level, unions work, and maybe the political equivalent of unions could eventually enact some kind of real change. I think as a writer and as a philosopher, part of the roles that we face is in outlining the problems and making people aware of that, and then hoping that they can work together to come up with solutions that we may not have even thought of. Like, yeah, to societal problems, I don't think typically your science fiction author is necessarily coming up with any singular solution and saying, this is going to fix this. They're
right.
saying, this is where I see things going. If you don't want to be there, let's all brainstorm something together.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's what I really think. I agree with you. I think that's really the strength that's being overlooked as well by the powers is this massive potential for brainstorming ideas, for coming up with new directions that haven't been thought of, that exists within the public, the citizenry, as a massive sort of brain trust of experience that's completely being overlooked, I think, by the powers. And I find that disturbing and concerning, I suppose, as well.
hmm.
Um, so the last question then. So your story suggests two possible outcomes for humanity, effectively. You've got a negative form. So had the angels not come by, at least according to the mythology that the characters believe, then humanity would have been wiped out by some calamity. Um, but they were saved, and so they basically moved out into the galaxy, expanding, and then you effectively have, I think you mentioned 12 different versions of humanity that have evolved within the
Genetically
galaxy.
engineered. Yeah.
And this is interesting
Wow.
to me because I think of this a lot as what's our path forward. And you did mention something that's similar to my views about the next 100 years. And so, from our current point, which of those two possibilities do you think is more likely that we will? So, okay, so it's basically, just to summarize, um, I look at it as humanity as it currently exists will end at some point, and that there's two possible ways forward, which is largely complete extinction, so we have nothing left to show for us, or that we evolve into other forms that spread throughout the galaxy. And so, from the current point of the world, which do you think is more likely?
Honestly, things aren't looking so great right now, but um, I don't, yeah, of course, I don't think that any sort of alien presence is going to show up and save us from ourselves. That's I think in a realistic standpoint, we have to be willing to save ourselves and save our planet, and that we are a long way away from making any other planet habitable or moving on to that. In terms of could we spread out across the universe, in a couple hundred years, maybe in a hopeful standpoint, but I read this quote, somebody was saying, like, if we have the potential to make other planets livable, we should have the potential to make this planet livable again too. So I think that has to be the priority.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm kind of in the viewpoint of we don't want all our eggs in one basket. But yeah. So this leads on to the second part of the question, which is just what do you think it would take for us to get into that stage where we can start moving out into the galaxy?
Well, I think that it depends whether we're what type of future we're hoping for. If we're hoping for a collaborative future where, people generally work together and get along, then that's a different future than if it's a space race where, various factors, political or corporate or whatever, are out trying to claim portions of the galaxy, and the reality that we would get. I guess, are you hoping for like a really dystopian future, or are you hoping for like you see in maybe the Alien franchise, or are you hoping for something more Star Trek-ish where people kind of more or less learn to get together and work together for the common good most of the time. Not
Yeah,
that they don't have their arguments and disagreements and factions and all that, but they can learn to put the good of the species above petty rivalries. Um, Unfortunately, I think the alien future sounds more likely than the Star Trek one right now. I mean, I hate to come off as too cynical, but in the current political and economic landscape that we see in the world, it doesn't seem like people are coming together. It seems like they're fraying at the edges right now.
right,
So I would say any sort of colonization of the moon, Mars, other parts of the solar system that might help us avoid any sort of disaster. Um, it seems more likely to be done piecemeal than any sort of organized effort by all of humanity.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
and then you'll have a whole bunch of different factions only just out in space.
So I guess yeah, the part I'm most interested when I ask this question, and I think you've summarized the options well. Um, Effectively, one answer is fairly easy, which is technology, and that would be the second one, right? So if we go out with all the companies going out into space willy-nilly, then it's more or less simply a matter of finding the technology that'll let us go.
Yeah.
I suppose for me, the more interesting question is, in fact, the first one. What changes to social structure, in fact, or that kind of thing would be required for us to go out as a species? And can you think of like one change that we might really need to enact socially to start going out,
Socially, I think we would
or
have to
psychologically, or any of that kind of?
socially, psychologically. I mean, I think again, in my mind, it comes down to solving some of the problems on Earth. Like there are enough resources on the planet that I don't think any human being should be without food, clothing, or housing. I think that we know from an absolute standpoint that these things exist. There are enough for all people, but they don't get to all people.
Right,
And you have to address the reasons behind that, which is that some people want to have more than other people. And until you can address that, it's hard to imagine any sort of unified humanity as long as psychologically we're in competition with one another
right.
instead of
Yeah,
cooperate.
that brings us into a whole bunch of issues which we could expand on, but I don't think we have time for today. So,
Probably not.
so, um, so it has been great chatting with you. Unfortunately, that is all our time today. But before you go, perhaps you could remind us of any upcoming books you have, where to find you online, and if you're going to be at any upcoming events, and maybe which country you might be visiting next.
Yeah, I'm not currently planning any in-person events. Currently, I am releasing the Ragnarok Prophecy series, which is a reworking of all my various Norse mythology series into one narrative. I'm expanding, adding new material, and also rewriting all the existing material. That's been a massive project. I am actually have been launching it through Kickstarter. By the time this podcast launches, the the current Kickstarter will have already completed, but I think there will still be late backer store up for people that want to support it. And as far as next destinations, don't know. We're still talking about that, honestly. Yeah, I definitely would like to get back to Southeast Asia soon. We
Yeah.
missed that a lot. That was a
Excellent.
really wonderful place to be in.
And where can we find you online?
MattLarkinBooks.com. And that's sort of the hub of my network. Through there, you can find my Facebook or Patreon and so forth.
And you sell books through your website as well, don't you?
I do have some direct sales. Recently, I've begun putting some of my books into Kindle Unlimited, which requires exclusivity. So some of my fantasy is in there right now. So you can only get the ebooks through Amazon, but you can get the paperbacks and audio other places also.
Right. Excellent. Matt Larkin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was nice meeting you.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk, as are the StoryCube images and original content from my guests. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.